So, Vuyo, have we had any dignitaries arriving yet in Harare for the former president's official funeral tomorrow?
Indeed, the official funeral service will go ahead tomorrow, but what the family representative Leo Mugabe was saying was that on Sunday there will be a ceremony at Heroes Acre, which is where the government would have wanted the former president to be buried. However, the family won't bury him there, or certainly not on the day. That is as far as Sunday is concerned. But coming to your question about tomorrow, Saturday, the heads of state, about 11 heads of state, are expected to arrive or have confirmed that they will be coming. Also, about 8 former heads of state will also be coming, have confirmed that they will be coming. And among those who are already here is Sam Nujoma from Namibia, as well as our own former President Thabo Mbeki. We caught up with him soon after he signed a book of condolences at the airport, and we asked him about how he thinks Africa should, Zimbabweans and Africans should pay tribute to the former president. And he says that actually he made a sterling contribution in the liberation of not only Zimbabwe but broader Africa. As someone who had spent a great deal of time with the former president, being tasked by both the SADC and the African Union, I did ask him whether there were specific moments in the numerous conversations that he has had with him that actually stand out, and when was the last time that he spoke to him. And here's a bit of what former President Thabo Mbeki had to tell me.
The last time I saw President Mugabe was in around July, August 2017, and I came here with Sidney Mfamadi because we had come to discuss a matter that I'd been raising with him for some time, which is a matter of his retirement. And we had agreed about that. So I'm saying that there would be too many moments of this kind. But we could come, and I said to him, President, I need to see you, because it's a matter that we've been discussing for some time. We should discuss again. And as I say, he came and he received us in the way that he always did. And really, we would really do value very much his leadership and the support that he gave to us.
Well, the former president obviously didn't win on that one, and the former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, continuing to rule this country until, of course, 2017, when there was that coup that lasted about a week. Fast forward, almost 2 years later, Zimbabwe has had a different president to the man that they knew for so long. Robert Mugabe did, of course, leave a legacy, but the question is whether Emmerson Mnangagwa has done anything to revive, in particular, the economic legacy that Robert Mugabe left behind. Dr. Prosper Chitambara is my guest this evening to take us through, first, Dr. Chitambara, very briefly, the legacy, economic legacy that Robert Mugabe left.
I mean, look, I would say it's a checkered legacy. When you look at, say, the first decade after independence, I think there were some gains that were made because government came up with what is called growth with equity, essentially redistributive policies aimed at trying to correct some of the injustices of the colonial regime. So you had a free education, free health care, and actually the economy actually did well. And even in the early 80s, there was some redistribution of land, which resulted in Zimbabwe actually recording an agrarian revolution increased agricultural production, increased agricultural productivity, and generally the economy was actually robust and very strong in the 80s. But of course,
itself the title of food basket,
bread basket of the African continent. Then, of course, come the 90s, where government under pressure from the Bretton Woods institutions of the IMF, the World Bank, adopted economic structural adjustment program, which resulted in deindustrialization and informalization of the economy. So there was a worsening of the structural distortions that we had inherited from the colonial government. Then 1997, that began the onset, that was the onset rather of the crisis. So between 1997 and 2008, we were in a crisis, which was exemplified by the hyperinflation. Then, of course, 2009 to 2013, that was the period of the inclusive government. 2013 to 2017, that's the end of Mugabe's era in 2017. Then come in the era of Idi Mnangagwa.
Before we get to the Mnangagwa era and whether he has been able to turn things around in the time that he has had, was the government a recipient of the problem, or was it a creator?
I think government was a recipient, the post-independent government was a recipient of the structural problems of dualism and enclavity. But government did not actually come up with effective reforms or strategies to correct the structural dualism and enclavity. So what has happened over time is that we have seen a perpetuation or an exacerbation of those structural distortions. Actually, right now, as we speak, about 94.5% of labor in Zimbabwe is now informalized. So that goes to show the extent of the informalization that the economy of Zimbabwe has actually undergone. So there's been wrenching structural changes that have been perpetuated by some of the policies that the post-independent government has actually implemented. And when you look at even poverty levels of inequality, they're actually very, very high and glaring.
With the benefit of hindsight, obviously, what could the government have done to stop what we're seeing now?
I think what needed to have been done, I think government made some mistakes in terms of commission and omission. Some of the decisions that took place, for example, the decision to compensate war veterans to the tune of almost $2 billion that had not actually been budgeted for. So that actually created a massive fiscal hole, which also then drove the indebtedness of the government. Then some of the decisions, like the land reform program, it was a good, well-intentioned policy, but I think the way it was implemented resulted in the decimation of commercial agriculture. So Zimbabwe, from being a breadbasket in the 80s, then found itself being a basket case, so to speak, because we really destroyed commercial agriculture, which was in the mainstay of the Zimbabwean economy. So I think largely, the decisions that we take got us where we are. So I don't buy the argument that we are where we are because of sanctions. I think we are where we are, I would say 90% because of the wrong decisions that government has actually taken. But when you look at even the Rhodesian government, they were under a UN embargo for almost 15 years, but they were actually able, through import substitution industrialization, to build a robust economy. You know that in 1979, even at independence, the Rhodesian dollar was even stronger than the US dollar in the pound sterling. But it was on the back of sanctions, which sanctions were busted by this import substitution industrialization.
Now, I mean, driving around Harare, one sees these like massive long queues. Initially, the day I arrived here a couple of days ago, I thought it was traffic. No, it was people parked on the side of the road because trying to get petrol.
Yeah.
Has Emmerson Mnangagwa and his government over the past, almost 2 years now, done anything to indicate to Zimbabweans and the world that they mean business?
Yes, there's been some reforms, but in my view, I think the reform agenda has been rather slow in terms of in the implementation of key institutional and also political reforms to bring back confidence and trust into the economy. So right now, Zimbabwe faces its worst economic crisis in the past 10 years. There are shortages of water, shortages of petrol, shortages of energy. Now we are having to undergo 18 hours of power outages, which was not the case even under Mugabe's rule. So I think we are in our worst crisis. Yes, there's been some reforms, but I think the pace has been rather slow. And so as a result, there's no confidence. And also government has come up with an austerity-based program, which has resulted in increase in taxes and also cutbacks in social expenditures. I was looking at the numbers in terms of the Treasury Bulletin for the first quarter of the year. Actually, government spent only 4% of total expenditures on social expenditures. So I think it's very, very difficult now to even to correct some of the wrongs because of the nature even of the fiscal position itself, which is highly consumption-oriented.
Now, I mean, there has been a structure, government, business, labor and civil society trying to come together to see what can be done to turn things around. I read a couple of days ago that the Minister of Finance is looking at establishing a monetary policy committee.
Yeah.
So are all these things yielding anything that people can look up to and say, there's some positivity, maybe there's light at the end of this dark tunnel?
I think so far there hasn't been much positivity. Yes, the government has managed to eliminate the fiscal deficit, but I think I always say that there's a disconnect between the economic numbers that we are getting from the Ministry of Finance and the situation of the ordinary person on the ground. So the ordinary person is actually not benefiting from that elimination of the fiscal deficit. In fact, if anything, the policies of government have spawned macroeconomic instability. Currently, we are in a chronic high inflation, which has eroded real incomes of economic agents. So I think that's the biggest problem now. How we now transition out of this chronic high inflation. Because once we are in a chronic high inflation environment, it creates self-fulfilling expectations, which then drive that inflation again, causing the country to enter into a vicious cycle.
Very, very briefly, I've got to let you go. Any chance that social partners, I'm talking here about, unions, and I'm talking about civil society, may become restless because they can't, cope anymore, and that may lead to some kind of instability?
There's that possibility. In fact, the World Bank in their Global Economic Prospects report actually highlighted that Zimbabwe is among 4 sub-Saharan African countries where there is heightened risk of political instability owing to the macroeconomic instability. So that would actually happen.
Let's hope it doesn't happen. Dr. Chitambara, thank you very much for your time. He is, of course, an economist based here in Harare. And that's where I'm going to end it. Nightline continues right after this.